Om Sadashivasamarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmaracharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om. Good. Be seated, please. Parameshwara. Good. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahavidyan Karava Vahayi Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahayi. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. Good. Nice to, where are you? There you are. Nice to see you all today. Welcome to you. Also, welcome to our many students taking these classes online. We continue our study of Chapter 18, the final chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. We'll begin with recitation, starting with verse 26. And as always, as I'm chanting, read the translation and then repeat after me. Mukta Sango Naham Vari, Mukta Sango Naham Vari, Dhrityutsaha Samanvitaha, Dhrityutsaha Samanvitaha, Siddhya Siddhyor Nirvikaraha, Siddhya Siddhyor Nirvikaraha, Karta Satvika Huchyate, Karta Satvika Huchyate, Ragi Karma Phala Prepsur, Ragi Karma Phala Prepsur, Lubdhohem Satmako Shuchihi, Lubdhohem Satmako Shuchihi, Harsha Shokanvita Karta, Harsha Shokanvita Karta, Rajasa Parikirtitaha, Rajasa Parikirtitaha, Ayukta Prakrita Stabdaha, Ayukta Prakrita Stabdaha, Shato Naishkritiko Lasaha, Shato Naishkritiko Lasaha, Vishadi Dirgha Sutricha, Vishadi Dirgha Sutricha, Karta Tamasahuchyate, Karta Tamasahuchyate, Buddhir Bhedam Driteshchaiva, Buddhir Bhedam Driteshchaiva, Gunatas-trividham shunu, Gunatas-trividham shunu, Prochyamanamasheshena, Prochyamanamasheshena, Prataktvena dhananjaya, Prataktvena dhananjaya, Pravrittim cha nivrittim cha, Pravrittim cha nivrittim, Karya karye bhaya bhaye, Karya karye bhaya bhaye, Bandham moksham cha yaveti, Bandham moksham cha yaveti, Buddhissa partha satvaki, Buddhissa partha satvaki. It's a good place to stop. We'll return to our verses. We start today with verse 26. Beforehand, there's a nice question which really relates to our subject matter here. We're studying a section where Sri Krishna is explaining karma and karta. Karma, action, and karta, sense of agency, the agent of action. And we're seeing this analysis in terms of sattva, rajas, tamas, like we've seen in previous chapters. So the question is about what about rajas and motivation. The question is, suppose I am planning a vacation. I am compelled to include only actions that I like, which he admits is rajasic. But would you include activities you don't like on a vacation? The point I'm making is, of course, you include only activities that you like in a vacation. Am I being rajasic about the kinds of activities I am including in my vacation? How do I make this a sattvika activity? So you can see that the activities you choose are not rajasic or tamasic. They're recreational activities, I presume. Well, I'm pausing because here in New Jersey, some people go to Atlantic City for a vacation where the main activity is gambling, and I would consider that actually a tamasa kind of recreation. So let's presume that he's going with his family, he's going to do some recreational activities, and he says, I'm compelled to do activities that I like. Well, that's raga and dvesha, that compulsion. How do I convert this into a sattvika activity? And it's a surprisingly good question, because we think that we just need to kind of make a nice American expression. You have to tweak the way you think. A little mental tweak is all it takes. But if you remember our prior discussions, it's based more on your underlying motivation. Let me make a general statement here and then explain it. The role of psychology and therapy is to change the way you think. Okay? How effective is it? It's debatable, right? Usually it's not completely successful. It's often helpful, but you all know how difficult it is to change the way we think and the way our feelings come. Psychology and therapy tries its best to address the way we think. Vedanta doesn't try to change the way you think, because if it did, it would suffer from the same problems as psychology and therapy. Vedanta takes a radically different approach, and instead of addressing your thinking, it addresses the underlying motivation for that thinking. All thinking is based on some underlying motivation, and conventionally that underlying motivation, of course, is raga and dvesha. Why do you go on a vacation? There you have it. Usually, raga, dvesha, oh, it'll be fun, we'll do this, we'll do that. To take a vacation because it's fun is rajasic. To take a vacation to waste money would be tamasa. We have to give illustrations, right? To simply waste money, to go to the most expensive hotel and to waste all of your money, I would consider that tamasa. Certainly, to go to Atlantic City and waste all that money on these gambling tables, absolutely tamasa. To go for a vacation because it's fun, rajasa. To go for a vacation with your family because it's a good thing to do is sattvika. To take a vacation is healthy, both for you as a worker and for your family, for the sake of bonding the family. To go for a vacation is dharmic. So to go for a vacation for the sake of dharma, because it's a good thing to do, it's a right thing to do, is sattvika. To go for the sake of fun is rajasa, and to go for the sake of throwing your money away in gambling, it is tamasa. So you see, the difference is we're not trying to tweak the mind here. You don't convert a rajasic mind into a sattvika mind. What you do is address the underlying motivation. That's what Sri Krishna is doing consistently in this whole section, and he continues. This verse actually introduces our next topic very nicely. We've already discussed 3 kinds of jnanam, knowledge, in the last class. We also discussed 3 kinds of karma in the last class, sattvika, rajasa, and tamasa. Today, Sri Krishna begins here with 3 kinds of karta, 3 kinds of agent. The technical term is agent of action. It's kind of a grammatical term, but it means the doer, the one who does something. So, what is a sattvika agent of action? Sri Krishna defines. Mukta sango naham vari, mukta sango naham vari, dhrityutsaha samanvitaha, dhrityutsaha saman. Siddhya siddhyor nirvikaraha, siddhya siddhyor nirvikaraha, karta sattvika huchyate, karta sattvika huchyate. Karta, last line, the agent of action, sattvikaha uchyate. That agent of action is called sattvika under certain conditions. What are those conditions? Go up to the top. That agent of action should be mukta sangaha, free from sangha, meaning attachment here, without attachment. You can imagine someone, we have to go to that vacation. It's usually, my neighbors just went there last year. They had such a great time. We have to go. Or sometimes, I don't know if people do this. Is there a competition with neighbors about who can go on the best vacation and all of this stuff? It's silly kind of stuff. That's all kind of a rajasic orientation. Here, someone who is mukta sangaha, they are not emotionally invested in going on this vacation. Again, they're going on vacation because it's a good and healthy thing to do. That's not attachment. That's following dharma. These people, such a person is also anahamvadi. Ahamvadi means someone who's egotistic. Anahamvadi, someone who is not driven by ego. So some people like to show off, so to go to a very expensive resort and then make sure that all your family members and neighbors know about it, that would be very showy, as they say. And here, anahamvadi, someone who isn't like that at all. Someone who is dhriti utsaha samanvitaha. Samanvita, endowed with all good qualities, including dhriti, commitment, and utsaha, enthusiasm. And these 2 are just given as representative qualities of all good qualities. So someone who is endowed with all good qualities, and a really important one here at the end, who is the one who is sattvika as an agent of action, the one in the 3rd line who is siddhi asiddhyoho nirvikaraha. Someone who is nirvikara, unchanged, whether the vacation is siddhi, successful, wonderful, or asiddhi, unsuccessful, not. Sometimes vacations go, they go south, as they say in English. Sometimes vacations don't go as you plan. You show up at the airport and your flight is canceled, and it goes downhill from there. That happens. So watch what happens if you're going on vacation because you really, really want to go to this particular resort and enjoy all the luxurious amenities, if that is driving you, that attachment is driving you, raga is driving you. If you're driven by raga, then being stuck in a hotel room in Newark, New Jersey, I have to tell this anecdote. This is 25 years ago, I organized 2 yatras when I was at Arsha Vidya Gurukulam. So we took all of our students, not all, we took a group of, I don't know, too many, 30, 40, some or more. We organized a yatra, and so it means in India. So we all arrive at Newark, and the flight is canceled. Seriously, that happened. So what to do? So I am the karta, I am the organizer of this yatra. So if our goal were to go to India and do all these things, if we were driven by raga, driven by attachment to do all of that, that would be a terrible disappointment. What we did, of course, is we went to the nice hotel, got a conference room, and had classes until we got the next flight out on the next day. So what's the problem? Be a little flexible, adapt. But you can do that gracefully only when you're not attached to a particular result. Sounds like karma yoga? It is one of many aspects of karma yoga. So this is the mature agent of action. By the way, there are 2 possibilities. Either this mature agent of action is either an excellent karma yogi who can handle, it didn't turn out the way I want. It's okay, I'll try again and do better next time. So that karma yogi who understands everything is in Bhagavan's hands, I can only do my best. So that skillful karma yogi will not be disappointed in the case of failure. There's one more person who won't be disappointed in the case of failure, and that is one who is enlightened. So the person who is being described here as the sattvika karta is either an excellent practitioner of karma yoga, or he or she is enlightened and therefore completely detached from the result of any and all efforts, having become so completely fulfilled within. That is the sattvika agent of action. Now the rajasic. Ragi karma pala prepsur, ragi karma pala prepsur, lubdo him satmako shuchihi, lubdo him satmako shuchihi, harsha shokanvita karta, harsha shokanvita karta, rajasa parikirtitaha, rajasa parikirtitaha. End of the 3rd line, karta, that's our topic. The agent of action, the doer, is rajasaha parikirtitaha. That agent of action is parikirtitaha, called rajasaha, is called rajasic under certain conditions. What are those conditions? Back up to the top. So a rajasic agent of action is obviously one who is ragi. That's pretty obvious. Driven by raga. And remember, we've defined again and again, raga and dvesha are not likes and dislikes. Raga and dvesha are compulsions. The compulsion to chase after what you want is raga. The compulsion to run away from what you don't want is dvesha. So one who is driven by raga and dvesha, that such a person is a rajasic karta, agent. Also, this person is karma phala prepsuhu. Prepsu is one who has a desire. A desire for what? Karma phala, the results of your efforts. So when you book that flight to Bahama or wherever it is, you expect the flight to take off. But if you get to the airport and your flight is canceled, by the way, do you ever see these like news stories or videos about someone at an airport check-in counter who is told that either their flight has been canceled or they came too late to get on the flight? There are cases where these people go crazy, they go ballistic, as we say, and they end up calling the police and getting arrested. This happens. People can't even control themselves at an airport. It's just amazing. This is the compulsivity of raga and dvesha. It can compel you to do the most ridiculous things. And it can actually end you up, take you to jail. How's that? Raga, dvesha can take you to jail. So this person is karma phala prepsu, is really focused on getting the result of their actions. They paid for the flight, they're getting on that flight no matter what. The person, and these, now some more kind of tough language in the next line. Such people are also lubdhaha, greedy, ahimsatmakaha, harmful to others, and ashuchihi, impure. In the prior verse, we had several values, dhriti and utsaha, resolve and enthusiasm, which were just examples of good qualities. Here we're seeing examples of not so good qualities. Greed is certainly an undesirable trait. Himsatmaka, willingness to cause harm to others for the sake of fulfilling your desire. How's that? Happens, right? The willingness to cause harm for the others, to enable you to fulfill your desire. Himsatmaka. And ashuchi, referring to that kind of thinking that would cause you to violate dharma. Dharma is a basic principle. To violate dharma here is ashuchihi, it is impure. Also, this rajasa agent of action is harsha, shoka, anvitaha. Endowed with harsha, elation, and shoka, sorrow, distress. You get to Bahamas, harsha. You're stuck in the airport in Newark, shoka. Either very high or very low. This highs and lows of life. You probably know someone who goes to extremes. Someone who goes to an extreme high and someone who then goes to an extreme low. Their life seems to be a roller coaster. Every time you meet them, you don't know what you're going to meet. Is it one of those really high days or is it one of those really low days? You get the idea that it's an emotionally unhealthy life to be on. They call it an emotional roller coaster life. It's, I don't know why. Some people like roller coasters. Don't put me on a roller coaster. I wouldn't enjoy it at all, a real roller coaster. And I don't think any of us would really enjoy that emotional roller coaster, but some people do. They are just attracted to the intensity of life. It's emotionally unhealthy to keep going through these cycles, the extreme highs and extreme lows. All of that is ultimately driven by this raga and dvesha, this compulsivity. And that's, so how to come out of this compulsivity. If you find that in certain situations some of this might have described you, then how to come out of that rajasic orientation? And the answer in a word is karma yoga, but we had this discussion last week, and that is karma yoga is predicated on a spiritual shift in your thinking. And let me make that very, very clear. Karma yoga, actually just to go back to Karma Yoga 101, following dharma is not karma yoga, right? Merely following dharma is not karma yoga at all. Think of someone who fulfills all their responsibilities and complains to every single person they can about how miserable it is and how overloaded with work they are. How is that karma yoga? You get the point. So let's understand clearly what karma yoga is. And karma yoga is a huge topic, as I've said before, and we can't get into the whole of it right now. You can go back and restudy portions of chapters 2, 3, 4, and 5. It's all there for you. But for right now, let's just recognize the fact that karma yoga begins not with what you do. Karma yoga begins with a shift in motivation. The opposite of karma yoga, you can't call it yoga. So a karmi, as opposed to a karma yogi, the one who is a karma yogi is different from the karmi. A karmi is one who sees pleasure in life as the goal. The goal of life is to reduce suffering. The goal of life is to maximize pleasure. How many people have that as a philosophy of life? My goal in life is to maximize pleasure. My goal in life is to minimize suffering. That's my goal in life. Such is a karmi. What is the difference for the karma yogi? The karma yogi realizes that no matter how much you maximize pleasure and no matter how much you minimize suffering, you'll still be struggling in life. You will never, ever gain perfect peace and contentment by maximizing pleasure and minimizing suffering. That brings about a radical shift of orientation. They call it a paradigm shift, big word. It's a shift wherein you're no longer driven to maximize pleasure and to minimize suffering. Instead, you're driven to gain spiritual growth, because maximizing pleasure and minimizing suffering will never lead to perfect contentment and peace. Spiritual growth will. That recognition is the beginning of karma yoga. Without that recognition, there is no karma yoga. Karma yoga then begins with a shift of motivation. Why do you do what you do? If you are acting to maximize pleasure and minimize suffering, karmi. If you are acting to follow dharma as part of a life of spiritual growth, karma yogi. That's it. So karma yoga begins with that shift in attitude. So how to overcome this rajasa orientation that Sri Krishna has described in this verse? Step one, have that shift of orientation, where you admit that no matter how much you maximize pleasure and minimize suffering, you will still never, ever reach a state of perfect contentment. And that then leading to the next recognition, which is a commitment to a life of spiritual growth, can eventually lead you to perfect peace and contentment. That is the solution. Karma yoga begins with that recognition. Okay, enough. So we've seen a Rajasa actor, agent of action. Now we see the Tamasa. Asakta prakrita stabdaha, ayukta prakrita stabdaha, shato naishkritiko lasaha, shato naishkritiko lasaha, vishadi dirga sutricha, vishadi dirga sutricha, karta tamasa uchyate, karta tamasa uchyate. Last line, tamasaha karta uchyate. One is called a tamasic agent of action. Under what conditions? Go up to the top. One who is ayuktaha. You can interpret it in several ways. I've translated it here as immature, which is perhaps the most common. Ayuktaha can also mean someone who doesn't meditate, and it has other meanings as well. So we'll leave it here as immature. Someone who is not mature, and when I say mature, I mean emotionally mature. We've joked here in this class about people in their 50s and 60s and 70s can still behave like children, think like children, emotionally act out like children. This is emotional immaturity. So such tamasa agents of action are ayuktaha. They lack emotional maturity. They are prakritaha, literally ordinary, but crude in this context is a good translation. Those who are stabdaha, you know someone like that. Don't point to your spouse. Always everyone has some stubbornness in them. People who are shata, that's a very harsh word. Someone who is just wicked. Someone who is naishkritikaha, deceitful, scheming, conniving. And someone who is alasaha, that makes perfect sense. Tamasa means someone who is lazy. And next to these, maybe you can't relate to too much. Next two characteristics I think most people can relate to. Someone who is vishadi, depressed. Have you ever been depressed? I have. When I was young, I went through a really long period of depression. It's the most common mental illness on the planet, and it probably affects, you can look up the statistics. I think it's probably around 1 in 3. 1 in 3? 1 in 3 people will suffer from clinical depression at some point in their lifetime. Fact. So, vishadi is this. So, you say, but I'm not tamasa, but even you can be affected by depression no matter who you are and how good a person you are. There's an important point here. Sometimes people suffering from mental illness are often accused of for not having good qualities. That is, the mentally ill person is blamed for their own illness. Why are you like that? Come on, come out of it. It's just depression, come out of it. And you blame, can you imagine if you have pancreatic cancer and a doctor blames you, it's your fault. What? How absurd. Pancreatic cancer which is a killer, by the way, it comes for a 1,000 subtle reasons that you get such a terrible illness as pancreatic cancer. In the same way, clinical depression and all other mental illnesses occur for thousands of reasons, not because the person has a weak character. I mean, let's be very clear. If you think mental illness is due to a weak character, you don't understand mental illness. It has nothing to do with character. It has everything to do with experiences in life and with the functioning of your brain, both. You can't say it's one or the other. You can't say people get depressed because of their experiences, because there are people who go through the same experiences and don't get depressed. Then you can't say it's because of the absence of enough available serotonin and dopamine in the brain. You can't say that either, because there are plenty of people with less serotonin and dopamine and they're not depressed. So how to explain it? It's complicated. It's usually a combination of both, but it is absolutely, we're talking about depression now. Depression is absolutely not a weakness of character. It is an illness like pancreatic cancer and anything else, and should be treated as such. So that is Vishadi, depression, and Dirgha Sutri. Everyone can relate to that. Procrastinating. The Sanskrit word is very interesting. Literally means long thread. Long. So there's a long thread that precedes any action. And that thread just keeps getting longer and longer and longer. So anyway, procrastination, we call that. Now, these are all characteristics of someone who is an agent of action, but dominated by tamas, by tamoguna. Once again, how to come out of that. And let's focus on this depression and procrastination, I think, because it's something everyone can relate to. Yeah, over the years, I have done my best to help many depressed people. They were usually students of Vedanta who also happen to be depressed. There's no rule that says just because you're a student of Vedanta and you meditate, you never get depressed. There's no such rule. So one of the features that I saw helpful in these individuals struggling with depression is this. A depressed person tends to become inactive, and that inactivity compounds the depression. It becomes downward spiral. So the depressed person withdraws. That withdrawal leads to even a further unhealthy lifestyle. And the more unhealthy your lifestyle becomes, the more withdrawn you become, the more depressed you become. So it's a spiral. They call it positive feedback in the engineering world. It's a deadly downward spiral. How to come out of that, something I saw helpful for some people I tried to help, was almost like a mantra. And I need to introduce the mantra. Tell me, you tell the depressed person, come on, get up and do something. And the common answer is, I don't feel like it. Okay? And that's what it is. I don't feel like it. Look at this. If you have a headache, you take some pain reliever, Tylenol, something. Tell me, do you have to feel like it to take the Tylenol? You say, oh, I don't feel like it. It's kind of silly, right? So it's a medicine that will take away your headache. Whether you feel like taking it or not is completely irrelevant. Just do it. Do it because it will help you. So several times I saw people who were helped, depressed people who were helped by this mantra, do it anyway. This is a mantra for a depressed person who says, I don't feel like it, and the mantra is, do it anyway. You don't have to feel like doing something to do something. You don't have to be in the mood to take Tylenol to take Tylenol for your headache. You don't have to be in the mood to get up and shower, have breakfast, go out to your job. You don't have to be in the mood to do it. You can just do it anyway. You do it because it is Dharma, is what it comes down to. Following Dharma is what it is. So the way, in fact, that applies throughout. For each of these problems, someone who is immature, someone who is prakrita, crude, someone who is stabdaha, stubborn, the solution to each and every one of these problems, these manifestations of tamoguna, tamas, the solution is follow Dharma. Step one. There's much more to come, but step one to come out of this dark tamas. Step one is follow Dharma. Okay, that topic is over. We begin the next. Buddhir bhedam dhritesh chaiva. Buddhir bhedam dhritesh chaiva. Gunatas trividham shunu. Gunatas trividham shunu. Prochyamanam asheshena. Prochyamanam asheshena. Prataktwena dhananjaya. Prataktwena dhananjaya. So we've already talked about three kinds, sattva, rajas, tamas, three kinds of jnanam, three kinds of karma, and we just finished three types of karta, doer, agent of action. Now we're going to get three kinds of buddhi, thinking, and three kinds of dhriti, resolve. And this is actually a very important topic. So Sri Krishna introduces that topic here. He says the bhedam, this threefold difference, this bheda, this difference of what? Buddhehe, of buddhi, which means thinking here. Differences of buddhi, thinking, and differences of dhriti, resolve, commitment. These differences are trividham in the second line. And they are threefold according to what? Gunataha, according to their gunas, sattva, rajas, tamas. So he says, look at the very end, Dhananjaya, O Arjuna, back up to that second line, Shrinu, listen. Listen, Arjuna, to what? Prochyamanam, to this description of those of buddhi and dhriti and their distinctions in terms of sattva, rajas, tamas. Listen as prochyamanam, as they are described, asheshena, completely, and pritaktwena, individually. So Shri Krishna introduces the next topic here. So we'll see, I think in this class, we'll see three kinds of buddhi, intellect, thinking. And then in the next class, we'll see the three kinds of dhriti, resolve. Let's see. Prakritam cha nivrittam cha, prakritam cha nivrittam cha, karya karye bhaya bhaye, karya karye bhaya bhaye, bandham moksham cha ya veti, bandham moksham cha ya veti, buddhi sa partha sattvaki, buddhi sa partha sattvaki. From the bottom up, sa buddhi, partha, O Arjuna, sa buddhi, that kind of thinking, sattvaki, is sattvic. What kind of thinking is sattvic? The third line. Ya veti, the thinking through which you know, veti, you know what? And this is the crucial distinction. You know bandham and moksham. Now that may seem unusually technical here, it's not. To know what leads you to bondage and to what leads you out of bondage. Bandha means bondage, moksha means freedom, liberation. And to put it in more general terms, what leads you out of suffering and what leads you into further suffering. That's what it is. Because whenever you choose to be, let me back off. Whenever you allow yourself to be driven by raga and dvesha, what is the consequence? Do things in your life get better or worse? When you allow yourself to be compelled, and almost invariably, things get worse. On the other hand, when you resist that compulsion of raga and dvesha, when you set your sight on following dharma, and more importantly, when you set your sights on a life of spiritual growth, moksha. This is a crucial distinction. How many times decision-making in life is almost always represented with the metaphor of coming to the fork in the road, right? You've seen so many drawings about that. So you come to the fork in the road. One fork leads to utter disaster, and the other fork leads to your destination. And it's up to you. You have complete freedom at that moment to take either the course that leads to disaster and the course that leads to your destination. And the idea here is you've got a map in your hand. So it's not like you're clueless, but believe it or not, some people having that map in their hand that tells them the left-handed path leads to disaster, what do? They're compelled by raga, dvesha. Say, oh, but this path looks so much more attractive. This path is uphill. It's harder. This path is downhill. It's easier. Even though the map says it leads to disaster. You get the metaphor? It's a choice between dharma and adharma. Whenever you allow yourself to be driven by raga, dvesha to acts of adharma, things will get worse. Whenever you resist the force of raga, dvesha to stay on the path of dharma, and in particular to stay on the path of spiritual growth, things get better. So here is the decision. The decision is, so the sattviki buddhi, the kind of thinking which is sattvika, is a kind of thinking that discerns the difference between these two paths. The path of dharma, which leads to disaster, the path of adharma, which leads to disaster, and the path of dharma, which leads to spiritual growth. And those two paths then are described in the first half of the verse. In fact, go up to the second line. So karya and akarya. These have dual endings. So to know the difference between what is karya, what you should do, and akarya, what you shouldn't do, pretty obvious. To know the difference between what is bhaya, which you should be afraid of, and that which is abhaya, which you need not be afraid of. The path of dharma is uphill. I agree. It's harder. The path of adharma is downhill. It's easier. But there's more to it than easy and difficult, right? So the easy path of adharma leads to misery. The more difficult uphill path of dharma leads to a wonderful life. So this is knowing the difference between bhaya and abhaya, what is to be feared, what is not to be feared, and finally what is pravrittam, that which you should be engaged with, and that which is nivrittam, that which you should not be engaged in. So here, that is the sattvika buddhi, the intelligence, the thinking in which you discern what is the path to disaster, the path of adharma, and what is the path to spiritual growth, path of dharma. Oh, How many times in a day do you make a decision? Many times. Not all of those decisions, but some of them are the fork in the road I just described. Not all of them. Some are trivial. Should I have a sandwich for lunch or soup? It's not a it's not a matter of dharma and adharma. But there are other more significant decisions you make in your day-to-day life, which are tremendous. It may look small, but it ends up not being small. Notice you say, people are often tempted to go a little bit in that adharmic direction, right? You've heard me comment before on the statement, just this once. I don't want to go through all of that again, but that's our common excuse, just this once. It's basically giving ourselves permission to do something adharmic, even though, by the way, that's our next topic, so I won't go further there. But here's the problem. You justify, not you personally, but people sometimes justify, it's just a little bit of adharma. Well, suppose you have this path of adharma and path of dharma. Suppose you go down the path of adharma only a little bit, just 100 meters. Now you're 100 meters away from the right path. Even 10 meters. Now you're 10 meters away from the right path. You get the point. Even small decisions count, is the point. Okay, let's see the next. Yaya dharmam adharmam cha, yaya dharmam adharmam cha, karyam cha karyam eva cha, karyam cha karyam eva cha, ayathavat prajanati, ayathavat prajanati, buddhi sa partha rajasi, buddhi sa partha rajasi, partha, O Arjuna, sa buddhihi, this thinking is rajasi, rajasic. What kind of thinking is rajasic? And Sri Krishna handles this brilliantly. He says, it is the thinking, top line, yaya, when you understand dharmam and when you understand adharmam and dharmam, when you understand what is right, what is wrong, when you understand karyam and akaryam, when you understand the difference between what you should do and what you shouldn't do, so it means that you understand you have that map. And the map says, this is a path of adharma, this is a path of dharma. So you know what you should do, you know what you shouldn't do, but, third line, ayathavat prajanati. You understand, you interpret that map, ayathavat, incorrectly. I don't know, I don't think you do this. You've seen some people hold a map upside down. So if you hold that map upside down, the path on the left now looks on the right. The path on the right now looks on the left. So it is a wrong interpretation. Now, that's a little bit, life is not so obvious as being guided by a map. I think a better way of understanding this verse is this. You know what is right, you know what is wrong, but sometimes the force of raga and dvesha are so powerful, you find yourself compelled to do what is wrong, even though you know better. There's a famous verse in the Mahabharata attributed to Duryodhana, where he says, Dharmam cha janami nacha me pravrittihi. I know what is right. I can't make myself do it. Adharmam cha janami na cha me nivrittihi. I know what is wrong. I can't keep myself from doing it. So in that famous verse, Duryodhana admits that he knows what is right and wrong. He knows what is dharma and adharma. He knows what is karyam and akaryam. And yet, he still does the wrong thing because of raga and dvesha. Raga for the kingdom, right? You know the story. I won't go through the story right now. Raga, he wanted to rule the kingdom. Dvesha, he hated the Pandavas. He was highly motivated because he really wanted the kingdom and he really wanted to seek revenge on the Pandavas. So he was highly driven by both raga and dvesha. So even though he understood what is dharma, what is adharma, he was helplessly compelled by raga, dvesha, and look at the consequences. Not only did Duryodhana lose his life, but most of his family lost their lives. His 100 brothers lost their lives. So, okay, one more. So this once again emphasizes the need to resist the compulsion of raga dvesha. And how do you do that? Remember the steps? Karma yoga, but karma yoga is preceded by that shift of understanding where you're no longer driven by worldly goals, but instead you're driven to follow dharma and seek spiritual growth. One more verse. Adharmam dharmamiti ya, adharmam dharmamiti ya, manyate tamasavrata, manyate tamasavrata, sarvarthan viparitanscha, sarvarthan viparitanscha, buddhi sapartha tamasi, buddhi sapartha tamasi. Partha, in the last line, sa buddhihi, this kind of thinking is tamasi, tamasic. What kind of thinking? Third line. He says, thinking which is in which everything, sarva arthan, in which everything, actually pick up in the beginning of the second line, manyate. One considers. One considers what? Now third line, sarvartan, everything. One considers everything, vipadhitan. You'd say ulta, same meaning. Viparita means ulta, backwards, upside down. So to discern everything wrongly is fine, actually oppositely, not just wrongly, in an opposite manner. What does it mean to consider things in an opposite manner? First line, adharmam, dharmamiti. This, which you call adharma, is actually dharma. Huh? It's amazing. Our ability to justify and rationalize adharma. That's what he's describing. To take something which is adharma and to say it's actually dharma. Look what's happening in I think Russia and Ukraine is such a great example. Putin has a strategy where he says we have to invade and conquer Ukraine for the sake of the security of Russia. I don't know if he's convinced about it, but he's convinced most of his country that that is the case, and it's not true at all. Putin apparently has invented somehow this idea that Ukraine is a deadly threat to the welfare of everyone who lives in Russia. It's not true. But he uses that untruth to justify his invasion of Ukraine. So the invasion of Ukraine is obviously a dharma, but he rationalized it by saying, no, it's our dharma. We have to fight Ukraine. We have to remove this terrible threat. Otherwise, every Russian will be threatened and harmed. This, in English, we call this rationalization. The best example of rationalization is just this once, right? Just this once means to give a rational reason to doing something that you already know is wrong. That's rationalization. That's what Putin has done, and that's what, in fact, I would imagine most wars are the result of that kind of rationalization, to somehow justify war. War is adharmic, with some exceptions. We've spoken at some length about how this Mahabharata was a dharma yuddha. We won't go into all those details. We've discussed it at length in prior classes. But let's say in general, killing people is a dharma. And to justify the killing of Ukrainians for the sake of protecting Russia is a rationalization. Why would someone do that? Why would Putin do it? Putin is I presume, I don't know anything much about him, but I presume he's an intelligent person. You don't get to be in that kind of position if you're if you're not intelligent. So then why is he taking these terrible actions? The answer is in the second part of line 2. Tamasa avrita. When your thinking is avrita, covered by what? Tamasa. And here tamas means ignorance. When your thinking is covered by ignorance, when your thinking is, sorry to use strong words, when your thinking and judgment is perverted by ignorance, and that's exactly what it is. When you if you say just this once, you're allowing ignorance to reign and lead you down a path of adharma. Even if you go 10 meters, it's still in the wrong direction. This is the power of ignorance and wrong thinking and the problem of raga dvesha. I don't think it's made more vivid and clear anywhere else except in the whole Mahabharata and in particular in the Bhagavad Gita. It's just a brilliant exposition of the consequences of raga and dvesha. Okay, good place to conclude for today. Announcements. Tomorrow we have our Vedanta class on Shankara's great text, Upadesha Sahasri, at 10 o'clock. Immediately after class is Satsanga, question answer at 11. Come and join us. And I want to repeat this announcement, an important announcement. Before the pandemic, Vasanti, my assistant, used to go around to people's homes and give programs. Those programs were really, really delightful. People really enjoyed them. They were shut down, of course, because of the pandemic. Finally, she's ready to resume these programs. The first program will be this coming Friday at 6:30, and the topic she's chosen is Vishnu Sahasranama. You'll do some chanting, she'll explain some meaning, and importantly, there'll be some meditation based on the Vishnu Sahasranama text. So you're all invited to join. I'm not sure where the first one is being held, so you can find out by sending an email to info@arshabodha.org. You'll find a flyer out there. So you're all invited to come. We'll conclude with our brief prayers at the altar. Om Gananahan tva ganapatigam avamahe kaving gavinamupamashravastamam jeshtarajam brahmanam brahmanaspataha nashranvan uttabasira saranam. Om Mahaganapataye Namaha Ishvaro Gururhatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavad Vyapta Dehaya Dakshina Murtaye Namaha Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschad Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Satkamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityor Ma Amritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat.